COP26, let's go in for them first, I think.
Or Flop 26, as we like to call it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is the most ridiculous waste of time and money that I have seen for a long, long time. What do you think?
I completely agree. What an absolute disaster it was. I mean, they piled in millions and millions of pounds into this. Around 400 private jets flew in. There were motorcades of cars, gas-guzzling cars, bringing these dignitaries, these rich people, these celebrities to Glasgow so that they could lecture the rest of us about our massive eco-footprint. I mean, it was such a staggering display of hypocrisy and narcissism, the like of which we haven't seen for a very long time. And I think it's backfired. I think a lot of ordinary people will have looked at COP and thought, who the hell do these people think they are? We're not taking lectures from them. So I think it's backfired, which is a very good thing.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean anything that backfired, because nothing will be done.
No, nothing will be done anyway. But even that appalling person, Greta, what's her name, hasn't, I don't think, had as much publicity as she was hoping for. She had too much. And she talks nonsense. She can't sing.
She's annoying now as well.
Abusive, and she's annoying. Yeah. And can we have her removed somehow, Brendan? Could we ban her from the country, do you think?
She is incredibly annoying, and she's like a prophetess of doom. She just goes around the world making everyone feel miserable. And she talks nonsense. That's the most alarming thing. That politicians treat her seriously, even though everything she says is nonsensical. She says the planet is on fire. Well, I'm sorry, but it isn't. She wants us to panic. She wants us to live in fear, which obviously is not a good state for people to live in. And you have these politicians falling at her feet. She's like, she's the messiah of this death cult. I think environmentalism has become an end of days.
But they didn't invite her, did they? So she was separate to this COP26.
Well, you know, they're all sitting around waiting for the end of the world. She is their prophetess of the end of days, telling us that it's all going to happen unless we beat ourselves up for the eco sins we've committed. And politicians do fall at her feet. She didn't get into COP26 specifically, but she was loitering around the edges, of course. And, you know, the political class, the media class, they love her. They think she's the face of youthful rebellion, when in fact she's just the face of this ragged cult of environmentalists, which I think most people are getting annoyed with.
And I'm not being rude to you, Ash, but why do most of them look like him?
They don't look like me. You mean they've got hair?
Yeah, they do.
They've got hair. There are slapheads in their ranks as well.
But most of them look like you. Most of them sort of middle-aged men.
No, they're mainly your age. Those people in the road were mainly your age. The baby boomers who've got everything and pulled the drawbridge up. And have caused most of these problems.
Jealousy makes you look really stupid.
No, I'm all right.
Brendan, the fact is, though, that, you know, you had people like, the appalling Nicola Sturgeon being photographed with her and various other people. And what worries me is that nobody, including our Prime Minister, and listen, I'm no fan of the Labour Party at all, but even when Boris Johnson said, when we do this, we'll see the end to climate change. I mean, the most flipping ridiculous thing ever. Climate's going to carry on changing. And yes, we might have hurried it up a bit. What we need to do is learn how to stop doing that. And also, nobody's talked about stopping building on floodplains or doing better infrastructure in towns and cities where people live. It's all going on about, we want to reach net zero in 2050. No, maybe 2060 or 2070. It's a waste of our money. We've paid, as you said before, 400 million quid of our money.
It's a complete waste of money, and it's just become this talking shop. And climate change has become the excuse for everything. Everything that goes wrong in society is blamed on climate change. If you look at the recent floods that there were in Europe, in Germany and Belgium, in which, some people died and lots of homes were wrecked, that was instantly blamed on climate change. It was turned into this religious event, as if we were being punished for our hubris. This is what you get, floods, because we're so sinful and industrious and greedy and all that kind of nonsense. But it wasn't to do with climate change at all. And in fact, if you look at all the facts and figures, there have been far larger floods in the past in those parts of Germany.
Over the last 500-600 years, because I saw some They showed the 1501 one was about 20 feet above.
Huge. Long before we had this kind of industrial society we live in. And the real problem was the failure of local governments in those areas to implement the right infrastructure that would protect against floods or warn when a flood was coming. So these politicians can get away with murder by saying, oh, it's all to do with climate change, it's all to do with carbon emissions, when in fact, very often it's their own failings that are letting people down.
Stay where you are, we'll come back.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Offence archaeology on Twitter. Quite terrifying.
Don't beg Jeff Bezos. Shut.
This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker. Late nights with James Whale.
On Talk Radio.
So we're all agreed here that COP26 is a flop, and we wasted money on it. We've actually probably polluted Glasgow more in the last week than they have done for a number of years.
And that's saying something,
I would have thought.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the sleaze thing in politics, if we might, Brendan, for a moment. I felt pretty sorry for what's his name, who's just stepped down in a way. Not wholly sorry, but a little bit sorry for him. But he's out of the picture now. But the way they decide whether politicians have done the right thing or not is not very well organised. It does need to be changed. And the way the Labour Party have behaved, and the MPs, writing threatening messages on other MPs' doors and graffitiing their offices and stuff like that.
Well, that was Tories, wasn't it? I mean, the Labour have kept quiet because a lot of them are
No. It was the Labour doing the Tories, mate.
Yeah, but a lot of Tory MPs were doing it to their own. There's a lot of Labour at it themselves.
I've not seen any evidence of that. You just made it up.
No, it's true. A lot of it was there.
No,
it was internal.
No, I don't believe people with haircuts like yours. Sorry, Brendan. But I think some of these people don't deserve to be public servants. They are, after all, our servants.
They are our servants, and they very often don't behave like they are. A lot of them, it looks like they're on the take. That's what I think a lot of people suspect about politicians. I think the Owen Paterson affair has been absolutely staggering. And the main problem, firstly, Owen Paterson definitely did some dodgy things. You know that you're not allowed to have all these jobs and to effectively represent the people you work for in Parliament and in politics. You're not supposed to do that. So he knew he was doing wrong. But the way the government handled it was just shocking. Firstly, they stood behind Owen Paterson and said, we're going to defend our friend. Then they changed their minds and backtracked entirely. The funniest thing was that they sacked this woman who works in the cabinet. She was sacked because she defied the whip and voted against keeping Owen Paterson in Parliament. And then they had to unsack her 8 hours later because the whole thing was a complete backtrack. So the incompetence of the government in getting a handle on this problem, I think that's probably the thing that will worry voters more than the corruption itself. It's the question of why can't the political class take it seriously?
Now, let me just ask you this as the chief political writer of Spiked Online. My political hero is Margaret Thatcher, and I worked all the way through the time she was the Prime Minister of this country, through the miners' strike, and gosh, she should be hailed as one of the champions of improving the climate when you think what she did. But I don't see a politician. I just don't see a politician who is capable of holding the line, if you like Margaret Thatcher did. Do you see any?
No, that is the problem. We have so few politicians that have got a backbone or any kind of moral or political authority. They're all like rabbits in headlights. They don't know what they're doing. They chop and change their views from one day to the next. They bow down to media pressure too often. I think they're out of control. And I think this scandal is proving how out of control they are. One thing that worries me is that sometimes they either underreact to corruption scandals, which is what the government initially did with the Owen Paterson scandal, or they overreact. And so I think we're now going to see an overreaction where they're going we're going to get this impression that all of Parliament is corrupt and we need all these new quangos and committees and standards in public life bodies and so on to keep a check on the political class. So I think the overreaction is a problem too, because it creates all these layers of bureaucracy.
Well, it's all coming out now, isn't it? Like Jeffrey Robinson making £1 million. But that was his job.
Yeah.
I mean, is it different if it's your job, although it was at the, where was it?
No, I don't think any politician needs to have more than one job. And I think that politicians have to really think. If they want to be a politician, fine. But if they want to keep another job going, I think they have to think about that really, really hard.
Yeah, I think, I mean, some politicians have jobs like they're a GP in their local area. That kind of thing makes sense. They're in connection with their voters. They're doing a job that's useful. They're still working in their constituency. They're getting to know people. I mean, sometimes the second job marries up quite well with the first job. But then when you hear about these politicians whose second job is doing 3 days work a year for some massive bank and getting paid a small fortune for doing so, that's when you start wondering where their priorities lie. Are their priorities with the rich people they're doing a second job for, or is it with their constituents who don't have as much money or as much clout as their other friends? So there is a conflict of interest, but I think it will be interesting to see where this scandal goes next. My fear is that it will be used to weaken the government because the government doesn't know what to do about it. And it could be used to introduce all sorts of new forms of bureaucracy, which I don't think will be very helpful. So it could spin out of control with some dodgy consequences.
Like the expenses scandal, a sort of another version of
it. Yeah.
I also think, sorry, what do you think about this? I also think that maybe politicians, because they're public servants, let's remember, not there for a career, I think they should only get to do 2 terms if, in fact, they can get in twice.
I think one of the biggest problems in this country is the safe seat phenomenon, because you have these parts of the country where, for various historical reasons, people just get, the same party gets voted in all the time. Now, that was kind of ripped up in 2019 to a certain extent, because lots of seats that we were told were would be Labour forever and ever actually switched to the Tories.
And 97 as well, that happened, a lot of change happened.
Yeah, and I think that was, exactly. And I think that was actually a positive development, because there used to be this patronising idea that you could put a red rosette on a donkey and Labour voters would still vote for it. And that has been proven wrong. But there is still a problem of safe seats. I always think of someone like, for example, Jess Phillips in Birmingham Yardley. It's amazing to me that a majority of her constituents voted for Brexit. And yet she spent 4 years trying to overturn Brexit, to try and make sure Brexit wouldn't happen. She acted against the beliefs of her own constituents, and yet she still gets voted back in, because those parts of the country are very safe seats. And you can end up in a situation where you have the same MP for the same area for decades and decades. So a more regular churn of politicians, I think, would be good for local constituents and good for Parliament as well.